Hello everyone, Zelrant here, and today I thought we'd talk about Klukai and her dupes and the breakpoints and what each of them mean if you're going to go over them. Now, like I've said many times, you do not need her dupes. She is still the best AoE unit and general use unit in the game at this point for us in Global when she comes out, and she still is the best AoE within CN at this point and still works extremely well within the Corrosion team, as well as if you want to do the Corrosion Hydro mix team, which is what my plan is. And you can kind of see when we go over her kit here, we're going to talk about her V0, her V3, and V6. This is not an entire kit overview. I'll probably do that video as we get closer to her actual release when she's actually announced. Because while it's almost certain she's next, it is not 100% guaranteed that Clue could somehow lead to someone else for some reason. It's unlikely, but I will go over the entire kit and kind of that. Then, right now I thought we'd just kind of take a look at a couple things and then why the different breakpoints are as important as they are. Just parts of it. We're not going to look at everything in that regard. And so one of the big things that you're going to have to think about too is she really wants to have her Corrosion members within her team, especially the Parida and Mekti combo, when Mekti finally comes out, is going to be really good for her. And Mekti will be coming, most likely, it seems like, after Klukai. So that's one thing you'll have to take into account, because if you're getting Klukai, even if you're doing V0, you're going to want Mekti because she's going to help out and be actually really good for Klukai in the future with other possibly non-Corrosion units, the ones that do a lot of AoE, the Kita being one such example of that. We'll kind of go into that there, and that kind of comes down to her passive here. The big thing is, I like the second part of her passive here, that kind of gives you that indication, is that for each instance of corrosion damage dealt by Klukai's active attacks or other allies, so the key things, other allies and corrosion damage, increases the Confectance Index by 1 point. For every 3 points of Confectance Index gained, decreases the cooldown to Devastating Drift by 1 turn. And Devastating Drift is her ultimate, and it is a very spammable attack. It has a very large cooldown, but you can reduce that cooldown through gaining Confectance points through doing corrosion damage from her or her allies. And why I say Mekti is going to be an important member that you can get, that's going to actually help with future-proofing Klukai, especially with other AoE units, is that Mekti, within her kit, she has Nightmare within her kit, increases AoE damage by 10%, increases AoE support damage by 50%, and changes the damage type of AoE support damage to corrosion damage. So right now, the main one that this is really targeting is Parida, because Parida has the support attacks. And if it's AoE, which Parida has, it's now going to be Corrosion. And any future units that have a support action AoE type attack, this can convert regardless of element. So it opens up some options to have potentially in the future non-corrosion units still work extremely well within Klukai's team. Potentially like a Parida replacement, for example, could be an option there. And so Mekti is going to be important there, because with her and then say Parida, you can really get these corrosion stacks going to make it where it's much easier to do this Devastating Drift attack as many times as you can within a fight, because this is really what's key in doing a lot of damage for her in the AoE side of things, as well as single target if you start getting your dupes. And that's because you can do it twice in a row, and it has a 5-tile width naturally, so she can hit a lot of things. And then if it kills 2 or more targets, the skill can be immediately used again. And so this is going to be, I mean, when you're just doing normal fights with normal enemies, non-boss fights, this is going to kill enemies pretty easily, because it's a very hard-hitting attack. So she generally can do this twice in a row, and that is very, very strong in AoE situations. And that is basically her V0. She's a very good general use, because she's going to be able to do a massive amount of damage over a covering of a map, because you can see the range she can go out, and then the damage extends out too on both sides to make it 5 tiles wide. And then when you think you do it a second time, you can do it again. So you can cover like a good chunk of a map with this attack. Now, what V3 does, what it changes, and why people say V3 is a really good point to shoot for if you want to be able to use her within platoon bosses as well as other boss battles is because her V3 makes it so that one of the conditions where it's hitting 2 enemies now works with a boss specifically. So if you look here, for each target hit increases damage by 10% up to a maximum of 50%. But if a boss target is hit, the damage increase is 50% immediately. So basically, you're getting the benefits of this attack by now attacking a boss, not just enemies themselves on the field. Which also comes with the second part here. If 2 or more targets are hit, or if a boss is hit, this skill can be immediately used again. Applies defense down, toxic infiltration on the target for attacking for 2 turns. So if you look at what it originally had here, if the skill kills 2 or more targets, so you have to kill to be able to use it immediately again. Now V3 changed it if 2 or more targets is hit, so it's not even needing kill. So when we have future content that may potentially have beefier enemies, which I think is going to happen, where they want to change from just being, hey, you got to do a lot of damage to a boss, to maybe now you have strong elite type enemies. So they have a lot of health. They're not boss level a lot of health, but they have a lot of health because they're going to want to start having us possibly maybe do some CC to prevent them from wiping your team because you can't one-shot everything. And if we have something like that, this makes it where now, hey, you don't have to outright kill them. You just got to hit 2 targets and then she can go again. Or if it's a boss, you can also go again. And then you also get the defense down 2 and toxic infiltration on it, which is great, providing more damage, as well as giving the opportunity for your team to do more damage. So this is a very future-proof AoE type stuff here on her V3 when they start making enemies bulkier and you're not just one-shotting with her on easier content. And so that's what the big thing with V3 is. The really, ultimately, the biggest thing is it makes her a boss killer right now on current content up into the current and CN, because she can do single target, and she can do enough damage on a single target basis with this 50% damage increase, and then also having a defense town that puts on them, as well as being able to attack twice with that attack. And if you have the Corrosion team, it's going to be a lot easier to spam this attack versus having to use, because like, well, when it comes to actually determining her abilities, like the first 2 skills are not taken into consideration as much. It's all about this ultimate when it comes to doing a lot of damage. Now there's other parts of those other skills, but we're not talking about them right now because they're not what is making the decision. It's ultimately coming down to the ultimate attack, that's why it's V3 and V6, which are the ultimate upgrades that matter. Now, the next big one, the big stopping point, is V6, and this is the next upgrade to the ultimate. Now the skill ignores damage reduction from cover, so now she's even more amazing on AoE normal enemy types because she's just going to straight up ignore their cover now when she's doing it, and then increases that width by 2 tiles. So it was a 5 tile wide, now it goes to 7 tile wide, and she applies terror. So if they start adding more enemies that are not going to be easy to kill in 1 hit or 2 hits, now she's going to be able to do some form of CC here to a certain extent, which terror decreases movement speed by 1 a tile, attack by 30%, and stability damage dealt by 4 points. So it's not a true CC, but it is going to dramatically weaken them, and so will work quite well there. But the biggest thing is the tile widening to 7 tiles. Now that's good for being able to cover even more of the map, but one of the big things that does that's not immediately apparent is one of our fixed keys, which is fixed key 5 here. Devastating Drift, which is her ultimate, decreases the width to 3 tiles. For each tile decreased, increases damage dealt by 10%. So it went from 5 wide to 7 wide, and now you're reducing it to 3 wide. And that just means you're getting an even bigger damage increase here on fixed key 5. This is going to be a big one to use when you're fighting bosses, because it's just, you don't need the super wide attack. So that's going to be a massive damage increase to single target damage from this, from widening the attack. And then after skill usage triggers the effects of Corrosion Infusion and the effects of Toxic Infiltration are triggered upon death for all enemies. Just some more damage there. But to me, ultimately, the biggest thing is, I mean, she's even more, for general content, going to just wreck everything with the reducing, or ignoring damage reduction from cover, as well as then applying that tear, which really can help in future harder content potentially, where they're bulkier. But then that width, just increasing her damage with the fixed key 5. And then you have all, I mean, of course, you have all the other stuff that comes with the other skills, but nothing too crazy there. Ultimately, you don't really want to stop anywhere when it comes to finishing her. I say, for a lot of people, V1's a good stopping point if you want to go over dupes on this first run, and then go over V3 on her rerun, so you can kind of conserve your pulls. But ultimately, your stopping point when you're saying she's good is going to be either V0, V3, or V6 for the majority of people, because you really V1, 2, 4, and 5 aren't worth it to stop at those points. I mean, like if you go to V5, you might as well get V6 at that point if you're going to kind of go that direction. Now, one thing to take into consideration is how many pulls you have, because just because you might be able to get to V3 now, the thing that's very likely to be happening is that Mekti comes after her. And like I said, we've already looked at her. She's a very good character for her. You're going to want to get her. And I think Mekti will bring more value to her than V3 will initially. And then on the rerun, of course, you'll want to get Klukai to V3 if you're going to V3. So you got to really look at your pulls. You do not want to put yourself in a situation where you don't have any pulls and you're not a spender. So if you're not a spender and you're not willing to spend to get more pulls to make sure you get Mekti, that can put you in a bind trying to get Mekti in the future. And so just think about that when it comes to pulling for her, depending on what you currently have. But that is basically the difference between the 3 breakpoints. Now, there's one other thing, and this is why I would say V3 is really just, I would never go V3. To me, it's V0 or V6, and that is because right now the biggest thing is platoon bosses, and you can borrow one single unit for that. Well, the best unit you're going to borrow is, because a lot of people are getting V6, you're going to be able to borrow a V6 Klukai. And so if you have a V3, yours is not as good as just borrowing someone that has a V6s. And her main 2 team members that she likes is going to be Mekti and Parita. I think most people, Mekti's going to be a must pull for me. And for most people, I think she is you want to get at least 1 copy of her. And then the same thing, Parita, you're eventually going to get a Parita. Parita's going to work well with her. So you should have 2 units that are already going to work really well with a V6 Klukai. And then you can just borrow the V6 Klukai from somebody, and then all you need is V0 on your account just so you have a good general use Klukai for doing general content, and then you borrow for the platoon bosses. If you're wanting to really utilize her a lot, then yes, you go over V6. And this is kind of my opinion on it. I know some people, they want to have their own and they want to get her V3, and that way they can do bosses that maybe you can't borrow units for. But none of that is hard enough. Like, you can do it V0. You can do the non-platoon bosses with the V0 Klukai and still get it done in the timely fashion that's needed. It's just not optimal. Not being optimal doesn't mean you can't use her. If she's your favorite character, but you're not a big spender, just get her V0 and you've got her. I mean, she'll be able to do the job. She's just not going to be the best for platoon bosses, and then you just borrow over that. It's not that big a deal. Don't spend money you don't have, is basically what I'm saying there. But that's just my thoughts on Klukai. Definitely my favorite character in the game. The only one that I say right now is kind of close to her in terms of, and I'd even put her at a higher value in the V6, is going to be Springfield. I've already talked about that in a prior video, so we're not going to go into that now. But that is stuff you need to think about for the future, is characters that could potentially come up after her, because we have no clue who's coming up next. It's likely Mekti based on rumors and leaks, but it could be anybody. It could be Vector. If it's Vector, Vector's one that you want to get V1. She's a very good pickup to get V1. And so there's 2 pulls potentially. Who knows what they could do? I mean, there's the rumor that Yuhi could come up. And maybe you want to get Yuhi because Yuhi makes the physical team a lot better. So don't blow all your pulls on her at this point. Kind of make your decision on what your target is, and then potentially just wait for rerun to go all the way to that target once you've kind of known what's come out at that point. But yeah, that's just a little bit of my thoughts on her and her kits and the V3 and V6 and kind of the differences. Let me know what your thoughts are and what your pull plans are for Klukai. But that's pretty much it. I mean, if you like my content, if you could like, comment, subscribe, it really helps. And thanks for watching.